Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back. My name is Mace, coming to you from Canada. I'm in British Columbia on Vancouver Island, to be specific. Why Canada joining the EU is America's worst nightmare. Yeah, maybe Trump's second term, like the silver lining of it, is we're going to gain independence, gain new trading partners, and new avenues as a country, as an economy, because Trump's, backstabbing, his tariff war, his comments about Canada being the 51st state, threatening our sovereignty, and then, his sycophants in the background saying, it's for the lulz, it's just a troll, he's doing this just to get negotiating power. Canadians don't give a shit about any of that. We see his words, we see them if somebody tells you they're a snake, listen. So Trump on trade war with Canada, and I don't think Canada joining the EU necessarily as a full member state is a possibility. Maybe in the future, way down the road, but I don't really see that happening anytime soon. However, there certainly could be ties that can be strengthened, new ties created, the existing ties strengthened and galvanized, and just to create a lot of new economic opportunities, which will leave a lot of money out of the United States. So let's hop into it. Yeah, that would give Canada hundreds of millions of new, potential customers. And Canada has so many things to offer. And the thing is, the United States perennially has kind of tried to keep Canada down. And we have a lot of natural resources. And our population is not that big, but at the same time, we're one of the G7, and we have things to offer as a country. Big things. So let's hop into it. Hope everyone's doing fantastic. Let's go.
Canada was meant to be the 51st state because we subsidize Canada by $200 billion a year.
And when he says we subsidize Canada by $200 billion a year, that's 100% incorrect. The guy's an idiot, and Canada's meant to be the 51st state. Shut up, dude.
We don't need their cars. We don't need their lumber. We have a lot of lumber.
They don't spend money on military because they think we're going to protect them?
Prime Minister Mark Carney recently called Canada the most European of non-European countries.
What if I told you that Canada could join the European Union and completely reshape global power forever? This isn't some fantasy scenario. It's a geopolitical move that would instantly create the world's largest economy, give Canada access to 450 million wealthy consumers, and leave the United States isolated on its own continent for the first time in history. The numbers are staggering. A Canada-EU bloc would control $25 trillion in combined GDP. But here's what makes this absolutely incredible. It's not just theoretically possible, it's actively being discussed in Canadian government circles right now. But first, let's take a look at this poll. In a March 2025 poll conducted by Abacus Data, 44% of Canadians support the Canadian government looking into joining the European Union given Trump's tariff and annexation threats, while 34% are opposed and 23% are unsure. When asked if there is general support for Canada becoming a member state of the European Union, 46% of Canadians expressed support for a Canadian EU membership, while 29% opposed and 25% are unsure. Think about what this means. Nearly half of Canadians are open to fundamentally restructuring their...
I'm not sure you could say nearly half of Canadians that broadly, but that poll is certainly interesting. Those are pretty solid numbers, for sure.
...country's place in the world because of American pressure. This isn't just polling noise. This is a seismic shift in how Canadians view their future. For decades, the idea of Canada joining the EU seemed geographically absurd. The European Union, after all, was built for European countries. But here's what changed everything. Brexit proved that EU membership isn't permanent, and recent expansions have shown that European is more about values than geography. Look at Cyprus. It's closer to Syria than to Brussels, yet it's been an EU member since 2004. French Guiana, technically part of France, means the EU already extends to South America. The precedent for transcontinental membership already exists. But the real game changer came with Ukraine's candidate status in 2022. If a country currently at war, with disputed territories and a developing economy can be considered for EU membership, suddenly the geographic and political barriers for Canada look much smaller. Here's the economic reality that makes this possible. Canada would instantly become the EU's second largest economy by GDP, larger than Italy, Spain, and the Netherlands combined. We're talking about a country with a $2.1 trillion economy, vast natural resources, and a highly educated population of 40 million people.
So I am just going to mention again, like, I really don't see this happening in the near future. Maybe a few decades down the road. Like, I don't know. There's certainly a lot of benefits to the EU. The EU's the first of its kind in the history of the world to have that many member states kind of working together to create prosperity, as opposed to just isolationism, which is kind of, in a nutshell, the crux of Trump's position is kind of, America first. America first, we're subsidizing everybody. Blah, blah, blah.
The EU isn't just gaining a member, they're gaining a superpower. Let's talk about what economists call economic gravity, the idea that countries naturally trade more with larger, closer economies. Right now, Canada does 75% of its trade with the United States purely because of proximity and economic size.
Yeah,
but EU
and that's
membership
changing,
would
I'm
completely
sure.
flip this equation. Here are the numbers. A Canada-EU economic bloc would represent 500 million consumers with a combined GDP of $25 trillion. That's 31% of global economic output controlled by a single trading relationship that excludes the United States. Canada brings something the EU desperately needs: energy security. While Europe scrambles to replace Russian gas and oil, Canada has the world's third largest oil reserves and massive natural gas deposits. Canadian uranium...
Yeah, our government, they could do a hell of a lot better capitalizing on that. Instead of, the deal with the States has not been beneficial for us.
powers European nuclear plants. Canadian agricultural exports could feed European cities. But here's where it gets strategically brilliant. Canada would gain what economists call market access leverage. Instead of being price takers in American markets, Canadian companies would become price setters in European markets. When you have preferential access to 450 million wealthy European consumers, you don't need to accept whatever price Americans are willing to pay. The numbers are staggering. Canadian-EU trade is currently worth about €73 billion annually. EU membership could triple that within a decade, creating hundreds of thousands of jobs and fundamentally restructuring Canada's economy away from American dependence. This is where the geopolitical chess game gets fascinating. American foreign policy has always assumed that Canada would remain in the US sphere of influence. Every major strategic calculation, from
It's time to move away.
NORAD to Arctic security to North American energy policy, assumes Canadian cooperation. EU membership would shatter those assumptions overnight. Here's the strategic nightmare for Washington.
True.
Canada controls the Northwest Passage, the Arctic shipping route that climate change is making increasingly navigable. As an EU member, Canadian Arctic policy would be coordinated with European interests, not American ones. When Chinese ships want to transit Canadian Arctic waters, they'd be negotiating with Brussels, not Washington. Energy becomes even more critical. Canada supplies 20% of American oil imports and 25% of American electricity imports. EU membership doesn't automatically
Oil, electricity, steel, lumber, potash, like it goes on and on and on. That's why Trump's tariff war is just self-inflicted harm.
cut these ties, but it creates alternative buyers who might pay better prices. When European countries are willing to pay premium prices for Canadian energy, Americans lose their position as the only major buyer. But here's the military dimension that changes everything. Article 5 of EU treaties requires mutual defense among member states. Canada would gain security guarantees from 27 European countries, while potentially reducing military cooperation with the United States. American military planners have always assumed Canadian airspace and territory would be available for continental defense. That assumption would need complete recalculation. Brexit actually created the perfect template for how a major economy can restructure its continental relationships. Britain proved that countries can leave established economic blocs and build new partnerships. Canada would be doing the reverse. Here's what makes Canada's position unique. Unlike Britain, which was leaving a trade relationship to build new ones, Canada would be joining the world's largest trading bloc while maintaining existing relationships. Canada could keep USMCA trade benefits while gaining EU market access, the best of both worlds. The legal pathway is clearer than most people realize. Article 49 of the Treaty on European Union allows any European state to apply for membership. The key criteria are democratic governance, rule of law, human rights, and market economy principles. Canada meets all of these better than some current EU members. Cyprus took 6 years from application to membership. Austria took 4 years. Canada, with its sophisticated legal and economic systems, could potentially complete the process even faster. Washington's worst nightmare isn't losing Canada as a trading partner, it's losing Canada as a strategic partner. For 80 years, American foreign policy has assumed that North America would remain under unified strategic leadership. Canada joining the EU would end that assumption forever. Here's what would terrify American strategists. Canada controls access to the Arctic, holds massive freshwater reserves, and sits astride critical shipping routes between Asia and Europe. As an EU member, Canadian policy on all these issues would be coordinated with European interests, potentially against American interests. The economic leverage shifts dramatically. Right now, when America wants to pressure countries economically, it can often count on Canadian cooperation or at least neutrality. Canada...
And yeah, when it gets down to it, that's in the Trumposphere. We have things that he wants. And that's why he's been such a bullheaded moron over the whole thing. And it's crazy to have, you know, the freedom-loving Americans just talking about annexing not just Canada, Greenland, like just, yeah.
Aligned with EU economic policies could actively counteract American sanctions, provide alternative financial systems, and offer competing trade relationships. Consider the China question. America wants allies to restrict trade with China and limit technology transfers. An EU member, Canada, might follow European policies that are more accommodating to Chinese trade, creating a massive loophole in American containment strategies right on America's northern border. The continental security architecture would need complete rebuilding. NORAD, the Integrated Air Defense System, assumes Canadian cooperation in defending North American airspace. With Canada potentially prioritizing EU security concerns, these arrangements would need fundamental renegotiation. Here's the most fascinating aspect of this entire scenario. The threat alone changes the game. Just the possibility of Canada joining the EU forces America to reconsider its entire approach to continental relationships. The poll showing 46% Canadian support for EU membership isn't just a number, it's a negotiating position. When nearly half your northern neighbor is open to leaving your...
So I'm curious how many people they polled to get those numbers. And like I said, I still don't see this happening, but it's certainly interesting to theorize over it.
...sphere of influence, you can't take that relationship for granted anymore. This creates what economists call a credible threat. Canada doesn't actually need to join the EU to gain leverage, it just needs the possibility to be believable. And with Trump's tariffs and annexation rhetoric, that possibility is becoming more believable every day. The ultimate irony? American pressure designed to bring Canada closer might be pushing Canada toward the most dramatic realignment in North American history. In trying to control Canada, America might lose Canada entirely. Whether this actually happens depends on choices being made right now in Ottawa, Brussels, and Washington. But the conversation alone has...
Well, listen, his rhetoric has driven a irreparable wedge between the two countries, at least for the foreseeable future. So, yeah, there is an effect of that rhetoric, the words, the annexation talk, 51st state, Governor Trudeau, the disrespect. Yeah, it builds up, and Canadians aren't going there. Tourism's down. Trade is down.
Already changed the balance of power in ways that can't be reversed. Welcome to the new world of North American geopolitics.
Yeah, I think Canada
US
strengthening its ties with the EU is a no-brainer in terms of trade and whatnot.
Canada was meant to be.
Yeah, like it's insufferable listening to this guy, and I think Canadians are just done with it. So
Canada was meant to be the 51st state because we
all right.